Welcome everyone to Pair Genomics June webinar. Today we are very lucky to be joined by Alice Marks from Winvic Pastoral, and she's going to be playing a game with us in selecting a bull team. Alice, can you give us a quick rundown of what you do and what Winvic Pastoral is all about?
Yeah, so hi everyone. Thanks for joining in today. I hope I can contribute something meaningful. I'm married to Darren and together we've got 3 daughters. We live at Winvic, which is located in the Kilcummin district near Clermont, so in central Queensland. The property was a ballot block drawn in 1957 by Darren's grandfather, and they started breeding white-faced cattle, so Brafords, in the 1970s, and continued through as a stud herd into the early 80s, then became commercially focused. A nucleus herd was always kept for breeding feedstock, like bulls and replacement females. From these white-faced cattle, and since Darren and I took over in 2015 it was, we've continued to introduce parent breeds, so Hereford and Red Brahman. Our breeding objective back then was just, cattle suitable to for the Japox market. Now we're sort of more targeting the premium grass-fed markets. So we're using lots of different technologies to try and get the right genetics into our herd that balance both fertility and production and carcass traits.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Alice has been a collaborator on the Northern Genomics project, which has formed the reference herd for the Repro BI GBVs. So yeah, she's been a big contributor to that, and yeah, we've really enjoyed working with her. So just to recap on the traits that we have for Repro BI, so there are the 8 traits. We've got the fertility traits. Heifer puberty is indicating how early or late a heifer might reach puberty and therefore be able to fall pregnant. So this can be the difference between a yearling or a second year pregnancy. P4M is our pregnant within 4 months of calving. So this is falling pregnant whilst they're lactating. And if we can get them in the window of falling pregnant within 4 months, you're more likely to have a calf every 12 months out of those animals. So very important for a northern production system. Our growth traits, we've got weight, which is equivalent to a 600-day weight. And this is looking at how well an animal will grow out in the northern environment. Height is measured at the hip. So this is how tall an animal is. Now, height is really important. There's a very strong negative correlation with fertility. So taller animals are less likely to be as fertile and vice versa. Body condition score is an indication of how well adapted they are to Northern Australian conditions. And then our adaptation traits, we have temperament, which is how well they respond to human pressure. Fly lesion resistance, which is obviously resistance to buffalo fly, how affected they are with lesions from flies, and then also what their tick load is potentially likely to be when affected. So again, most of you will have seen this, but this is what Repro BI looks like, what the GBVs look like. We present them as quintiles or these rankings here, which are the 1 to 100s. And also benchmarking graphs, which add a nice bit of pop of color to spreadsheets, which is always good. The quintiles are our 1 to 5 rankings, and this is what we're going to be looking at today as we go through our bull selection. So we have the 8 traits across the top there, and consider what these rankings mean for each trait. So for weight, a 1 would mean a lighter animal throughout its lifetime, whereas a 5 is a heavier animal. Height, a 1 is a shorter animal, whereas a 5 is a taller animal. Condition score, 1 is not as well adapted to Northern Australia, and a 5 is very well adapted to Northern Australia. Puberty and P4M, a 1 is less likely to reach early puberty and less likely to rebreed, whereas a 5 is more likely to reach early puberty and more likely to rebreed. Temperament, 1's a bit cranky, 5 is a lot quieter, and tick and fly, 1 is lower resistance and 5 is higher resistance. So what that looks like across the quintiles and the rankings, so the 1 to 5s and the 1 to 100s, when there's a 4 for weight, so this is indicating an animal that's above average for 600-day weight, that can look like a ranking anywhere from 60 to 80. When we're looking at a 3, which is an average GBV quintile, that can be anywhere in the range of 40 to 60 in the rankings. So there's a bit more movement in the rankings, whereas the quintile is just that simple 1 to 5 system that we typically prefer, especially with the accuracy of GBVs at this stage. The rankings are more likely to move as the reference herd is updated than the quintiles. So today's game, we've got 12 bulls here, and the aim is to keep 5. So I'm going to pass over to Alice to explain, again, reiterate what Winvic Pastoral's breeding objective is, because it's very important to keep the bulls she's selecting are in the context for Winvic Pastoral, and the bulls you might be selecting if you want to play along at home might be different to what she's selecting for their circumstances. Take it away, Alice.
Thanks, Elsie. So I did mention earlier that we are trying to supply cattle into the grass-fed market, so MSA market. So we are looking for carcass traits on top of these important fertility traits. Yep. I also mentioned that we cross Hereford and Brahman back into our herd. And that it's stabilised by the Braford genetics. I guess our breeding objectives could loosely be described as a polled, fertile herd of tropically adapted cattle suitable for the MSA grass-fed markets. The two things, I guess, that we want to concentrate on is the fertility. So those fertility traits are very important to us, but we don't want to compromise weight. So it's balancing those two things. We've also got the added layer of having the Hereford cattle coming in and perhaps boosting our carcass and fertility credentials, but also losing a bit of adaptability there as far as tick and fly goes. Yep. So they're things that we have to keep a handle on.
Yeah. And we'll make a special note that all 12 bulls that are in this selection have already passed their bull breeding soundness evaluation, and they are phenotypically and structurally sound on the ground. So they're good to go to work, and now we're pulling in the genomic evaluation to just double check that we're not bringing in duds into our herd, into our herd's genetics going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing we do is we yearling scan the bulls for intramuscular fat and EMA, so eye muscle area, and the bulls that aren't above average, they get knocked out. So that's another little selection criteria on top.
Yep. So we've kicked off with the first part of this bull team selection is the fertility check. So there are 3 bulls there that Alice has crossed out, and we've got 2 with question marks against them. Do you want to give us a quick rundown as to why you've chosen these ones to maybe go in the bin at this stage?
Yeah, so pretty easy just to knock out the bottom ranking for both the puberty and pregnant at 4 months. But there are 2 question marks there. And we started off with just 1 question mark bull, but then when we looked a bit closer at bull number 5 with a P4M of 1, so he may not have stability in the herd, but he does offer a heavier weight, and he also offers a bit of tick resistance. Bull 2, same thing. He might be a low 2 for P4M, and bull 5 might be a high 1 for P4M. So both those bulls still quite heavy in the weight there. So at least if you're focusing on your end game of supplying that carcass into an MSA market, those 2 bulls still might fit that requirement.
Yeah. Awesome. So as Alice mentioned, we've got the 3 that are crossed off. There you can see a little bit closer as to 2 and 5 across the traits. So yes, there's some red and orange there, but they do have some redeeming traits that might fit in the circumstances and in the context of Winvic Pastoral. So onwards with the growth check. Jeez.
Yeah, so we want bulls in the 4 and 5s in our herd. So bull 7 there becomes a bit questionable, I guess, but he is a very well balanced bull.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's when you start looking at your body condition score. So that's a proxy for adaptability, and just looking at the different options you have there.
Yeah. Yeah, so a few more question marks. Bull 8 is out. He's below average for weight. He's a very short animal, which isn't an issue. That just depends on what you're trying to breed. But the fact that he is very short is also perhaps compromising his ability to put on weight around that 600-day mark. So we've culled 4 bulls, and now we've got the adaptation traits to have a quick look at.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Herefords bring in hair, possibly a bit of intolerance in the heat as well. So we do need to keep an eye on selectively joining those heifers and cows that are perhaps 3/4 Hereford blood, the low content ones, and that's when I'd be using the tick and fly scores to make sure that we're making sensible breeding decisions there.
Yeah. All right. So we've ended up with the top 7, which is still a bit away from the 5. Alice, would you like to explain to us what sort of, would you keep 7 instead of 5, and what sort of strategies would you use within your herd to mitigate the risk of using bulls that might not be quite up to standard with particular traits?
Yeah, definitely. As I said, you can be selective with cows that are quite strong in some traits and use bulls that are strong in other traits to try and balance the progeny up. I do think a great strategy, which was actually shared by Lincoln Job at a producer day I was at, was always put your good bull team in first. So it might be for the first 2 cycles or 3 cycles. You know, the bulls that you know are going to breed on and that you want to retain in your herd, put them in first, and then your experiment bulls. These weren't his words about experiment bulls, they're mine. But these bulls that are a bit iffy, so your number 6 and number 7, you can then pop them in at the end and just see what you end up with, especially with these bulls that are probably a bit better for adaptability. They might not be giving you the weight you want, but if you've got a cow that's quite heavyweight, quite hairy, and you want to have a play around, it's pretty safe to put those bulls in at the end of the breeding season.
Yeah, nice. So keeping in mind, obviously, this bull team selection is suitable for Winvic Pastoral in that Kilcumin region. If you're running animals up in the far north, your selection might have looked a little bit different, where you might be balancing those adaptation traits a little bit more heavily. So very important to keep your selection decisions in the context of the environment that you are breeding in, or the environment that you're selling seed stock into. So it comes back to mapping out breeding objectives. What's the market that you're meeting? Are you grass fed? Are you feedlot? Are you live export? All of these things start to play a role, and obviously what the challenges are in your location depends where you are in regards to the tick line, and how far north you might be with flies. So keeping all of this into consideration, with GBVs, we haven't indexed them because we just think that everyone's situation is different, and you can select your animals based off what your unique challenges are in your location for your breeding goals. So I'll pass back over to Alice to talk about what they've been doing in the last few years to accelerate their genetic gain.
Thanks, Elsie. Yeah, so one thing that we started doing was actually after listening to Darren Hamblin talking about how far he's taken objective measurement with the Wagyus. And there was a few things that stood out to us, and that's about identifying your high-performing animals and then replicating them, multiplying them, and as quickly as you can. So we've tried to copy that at a much smaller scale, utilising IVF and AI. So we select donor females that are objectively measured. This was prior to GBVs. I might add the example that's on the screen right now is a Braford donor cow with her calves there. Her eggs were split two ways, so she had embryos from the Hereford bull that's on the screen and also from a really nice red Brahman bull. The advantage in doing that is you can actually measure the progeny against each other, and your own database becomes very important then going forward and meaningful. So interesting thing about this joining, especially with this Hereford bull, is the correlation between the EPDs and EBVs in Australia, EPDs in America, actually marry up to the GBVs. So if you look at the graph there of the EBVs of this bull, he's superior for pretty much all traits except for the gestation length. You have to wait about an extra week for the calves to drop. But that does shorten up with selective joining. So his progeny's GBVs are very, very strong, which is great that we've got a correlation there.
Yeah, and his progeny were the number 3 heifers that they've gone into the Northern Genomics reference herd, into the ReproBI reference herd. You mentioned before that this donor cow and these calves, that these two on the left here are by the Brahman bull and the others by the Hereford bull. Do you want to talk about how you saw that difference reflected in their GBVs?
Yeah, so there was probably a lower, well, there definitely was a lower P4. Actually, it was a P4M and slightly lower puberty for the Brahmins, which is expected. I don't think that'll come as a surprise to anybody. These heifers, they're now rising 3-year-olds. There's only one that hasn't calved out as a 2-year-old. And they will go into our donor program now that they've proven themselves. Yeah, so exciting things to come from these heifers. The Brahman bred ones are superior for adaptability traits, for sure. Interestingly, when we did our carcass scanning of these cattle, the Herefords were superior for IMF, for intramuscular fat, and the Brahmins slightly superior for eye muscle area.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's right. And I think that's where, when we start looking at multi-breed genomic evaluation like the GBVs, we're looking at crossbred animals. There's higher Brahman content animals, and there are sort of lower Bos indicus content animals in that reference herd. So it does often come back that a higher Bos indicus content animal like a Brahman might be a bit behind when it comes to the fertility traits, but it's really important to balance that up with their adaptation traits, which we see that they really are quite a way ahead of a lot of other breeds. So yeah, really important to just find that balance in your herd to suit your requirements in your environment. All right, I'll flick on to the next slide, and as I do, I'll just introduce Marty, Lil, and David McKean, who have joined us on this webinar. So Marty and David are with Chadwick Brafords, and they've got long links back to Argentina, actually, which is something we're going to talk about soon. So Marty and David were running an embryo transfer program back in the late 80s, early 90s, so really well before its time. And they actually sent semen over to Argentina that has formed the basis now of the Braford herd over there. And we'll get into that a bit more. Alice, do you want to take us through what's happening here on this slide? What's the exciting news?
This is an amazing opportunity that I'm very grateful to have had through our association with the Marty and David and Chadwick Downs. So I'm interested in doing things outside the box and measuring it as we go. Marty and David have wonderful contacts in South America, very knowledgeable about South American genetics, and an opportunity landed in our lap to import some Argentinian bred Braford genetics that I'll let Marty explain how it came about, which has just landed in Australia. I think we know it's the first import of Argentinian genetics, and we're hoping that we can form a bit of a linkage with some of those overseas herds and really fast track the measured traits within Australia and the Australian Braford herd. We do have great Braford genetics in Australia, but it's not very well measured. So this will be a great way of quantifying what we've got.
Marty, do you want to give us a quick rundown as to how this opportunity came about and what the process has been like?
Yeah. Thanks to this, it's been a bit of a whirlwind over 5 years to get this project up and running. As you mentioned, we've been exporting and working with Latin America for 30 years now. And we've seen the Braford breed in particular grow exponentially, and it continues to grow. It's quite phenomenal what the Argentinians, Brazilians, Paraguayans have done with the cattle industry, and rocketed right past countries like Australia and possibly some aspects of the US as far as data recording in these herds. So we've been working with, we've got great relationships in Argentina and Paraguay and Brazil with people that we've been working with for a long time. And this particular project has taken quite a bit of time and a lot of stress to get up and running. And we've managed to find a way that we can import Argentinian genetics to Australia. It's been a little tricky, but we've gone a long way around. Now, the reason we can't go direct is Argentina is currently has a ban on importing genetics because of their foot and mouth disease status. While they haven't had a case of foot and mouth disease for 20-something years, the country vaccinates. So all testing would come back positive for foot and mouth disease. So that's one reason. Paraguay is similar, and Brazil, interestingly, has just declared that it is foot and mouth disease free without vaccination, but then they've got a mad cow disease issues to deal with and a few other political and bureaucratic issues to deal with. But so things are changing. But in this particular case, we were able to take a frozen embryo from Argentina and export it to Canada, where they do do allow importing of Argentinian genetics. So they recognize that there's not a lot of, well, there's virtually zero risk of importing diseases via a frozen embryo.
Yet the Australian biosecurity won't take that risk at all, even though as small as it would be.
Yeah.
So this is the way around it.
So the embryo was implanted into a recip in Canada. And then once they had confirmed pregnancies, the truckload of recips was transported down to the US, right down to Texas, where it was carved out. The calves were born and collected semen in this bull. So it's an exciting opportunity. And like you say, it's going to provide not only an outcross genetics, but also linkages, which is going to blow this space apart. In Argentina, there's around 50,000 animals on their register that have a lot of data recorded. Many of those have Australian genetics. So instantly this allows Australia to have linkages and access to that database, which is going to be phenomenal. So it's quite exciting time to be involved, particularly in Brafords.
Yeah, and that's what Marty's talking about there. Over in Argentina, they work on EPDs, or estimated progeny differences, which is very similar to an EBV. In this case, these are DNA estimated progeny differences, which is kind of like single-step breed plan. So these are the SAR and DAM of the imported semen. And as you can see, there are 6 traits that are measured, and we've got EPDs for a range of things. This cow and sire are in the top 20%, if not higher, for Brafords over in Argentina for most of these traits. The only one, I think, birth weight, they have a heavier birth weight. So maybe not a heifer cross unless very closely managed. But when you look at their weights, their maternal abilities, milk and growth, and scrotal circumference, they are well and above. And it's easy to see why these genetics are being imported into Australia. And it will be very exciting to see what the outcome of this cross is. Now, I know for Alice, the heifers or the females that she'll use as the donor cows for the semen will be screened using GBVs. And yeah, we'll expect some pretty great results there, Alice. No pressure.
It might be a second webinar we might have to have looking at results. Yeah, it was interesting gaining an insight from Marty and David about the Brafords in Latin America, and that they tend to be shorter, stockier type animals, whereas in Australia we seem to have leggier animals. So I think when the GBVs come back, it'll be interesting to see where they sit as far as hip height and weight. Adaptability, I'm expecting that the adaptability traits like tick and fly are going to be superior to what's in our herd already. And I think that bull will make a lovely cross with our perhaps taller, heavy, not so well adapted cattle. I think he'll clean up a lot of traits that we're looking to improve.
Yeah.
We did the first AI yesterday. The semen had only been in the country 5 days. So we didn't waste any time. So we'll know in 9 months.
Yeah, no, that'll be great. We'll talk again in 9 months.
Okay.
If anyone on the webinar has any questions, please put them in the Q&A or message them through to me, and we'll get them answered. As we mentioned, Marty and David, the Argentine Braford Society is now enormous. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about what they're actually doing over there and what their focuses are at the moment?
Yeah, well, I'll sort of kick off. Very impressive organisation. Very, very smart people. It's really I won't say corporatized, but they treat it like a corporate. The society has got at least 19 permanent staff. They work in their offices across 3 areas in the country, and it's a big country like Australia. The climate and the production challenges are very different to the very south, to the north. The north is quite tropical as it sort of borders on Brazil and Paraguay up in the north. But, a lot of the Brafords are in that central area, probably, to the right of where the sun's shining there on the flag map. But look, very impressive, very progressive group as well. Highly collaborative. The CEO there is really loves to look at any opportunity that they can collaborate with other countries. And traditionally, it's been their neighbours around there, though each country is very different. Their economies nonetheless, but a lot of collaboration also with Australia, South Africa, United States as well. But outside of South America, it's on a totally different scale. Their scale there for everything is mind-boggling. We've seen farms with 10,000 breeding females of one breed there, more than we probably have in all of Australia. A lot of the production too, they tend to rely on other sources of income, be it forestry or rice or some sort of other production. And sometimes cattle is maybe the smaller income stream for them, even though it's on a large scale. You've seen it evolve over the years too, haven't you?
Yeah, it's gone from, I guess, a similar system to ours, where each breed society is more like it's a fancier group, but to today, where it's a very professional, very corporate association and very wealthy. They're all pulling in money from these registered cows. It's quite a status thing, but also the associations are also really interested in branching out and looking at other opportunities. So I know in particular the Braford and Brangus associations have now launched their carbon neutral program, or their sustainability program, so they can certify breeders as being sustainable or regenerative. They're putting aside, as an association, putting aside land for native revegetation or for protection of local fauna. So there's a branching out, not just within that particular breed, branching out into branded beef or into quality assurance programs. So it's a really interesting space, and it sort of shows you what a group of like-minded people can do when they collaborate and join forces.
They're very consistent too in the type and style they're breeding for. Though being a very large industry with a lot of players in it and a lot of livestock, there are a few people in the middle, or a small number, that are sort of controlling, I guess, and influencing what the output is generated to look like. So they're very focused on that. The other thing I'd probably observe is there's such a strong, across all of Latin America, a strong connection between the show circuit and the sale outcomes as well. A very, very large, very professional showing circuit across the country, and you'll get 500 Brafords at their national show each year, and then typically there's a sale straight after that. So it will translate into success, those ribbons, and I don't think we see that here on the same scale at all.
Yeah, just look at the size of the ribbons that they hand out over there. They just
That's just one. Like sometimes they get sashed with about 7 or 8 of them. So they're festooned. You often can't see what's underneath.
Yeah.
You see, it'll be nothing to have the shows will all be televised live on TV and streamed. You'll get at least 1,000 people at a show, and yeah, it's pretty passionate. It's a pretty amazing thing to see.
It's incredible thinking that they've come so far in just 30 years from no Brafords to now having 45,000 animals that are EPD recorded as part of their association. So when we put that in the context of Australia, that would be looking at how many Brafords are EPD.
Yeah, and look, their success today, it's very humbling that they do acknowledge Australia, and particularly Chadwick Downs, thanks to Marty's efforts over the years, had a massive role in that. They actually awarded you, I think, a couple of years ago, sort of the not the keys to the country, but the really acknowledging the contribution to the Argentine beef cattle industry, and I thought that was just phenomenal. And you'll see the bull on the screen. Chadwick Downs Grand Slam is famous over there. He's in, I think, Chadwick are in about 70% of the pedigrees. So that is really humbling, but it also presents, what's next. They want the next new thing. So seeing where they are, what their type is, and what their demand is driving. is really something that we need to sort of continue to pursue
Mhm.
and do the next best thing there. But as mentioned before, to have this now a two-way trade, we've never been able to get the genetics here before. Yeah, it's a game changer. That's just the beginning. Very long, very expensive process, but it shows it can happen.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned when we were catching up yesterday that they actually listen to their advisors over there, and that's why that's why they've been able to create quite an even line of Brafords, because that's how the advisors have driven the system.
Yeah, there's quite a small number of advisors. They're also the primary judges. Their judging industry is very regulated. You know, people have got to be highly accredited to be able to judge and at different levels. So you've sort of got this central group of people who are also some of the biggest stud breeders and owners as well too. So yeah, it results in a lot of consistency.
Yeah, I guess the advisor role dynamic is a cultural thing. It's not just in the beef cattle world. So there's much bigger reliance on agronomists that work with groups of farmers, and certainly in the sheep and horse industries as well. So the role the advisors play is absolutely key in the direction of cattle breeding. And what it means is that a breed can really turn itself around quite quickly if a few advisors determine this is the direction that the breed is going, then all of a sudden you have 300, 400 stud breeders turn around and say, yes, let's go in this direction. Then you can really move mountains in the case of changing a breed and really focusing in on certain traits or criteria. So it's quite an impressive system that when it works well.
In the last, say, 10 years, they've been focusing a lot on the males with the phenotypes to become much more bigger and masculine looking. And we observed probably 3 years ago that may have just overflowed a bit too much into the females. Looking at some of those females who are't macho, and they acknowledge that as well too.
So they'll fix it.
They'll fix it. They'll sort of breed that out. So
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Considering if everyone goes in the same direction, with such a big herd, maybe you're not losing genetic diversity, but if you might start to lose weight on some traits if you go too far one way. So it's an interesting process to probably watch. They've probably zigzagged a fair bit to be like, oh, we've gone too far that way, we've lost this trait, we need to just come back a bit more and pick them up again.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you can go quite quickly with genetic gain, but sometimes it's too quick.
Yes, absolutely.
If you go a bit slower, you're less likely to lose other important traits. And I think we're seeing that in Australia at the moment with polled gene selection.
Yes. It also leaves an opportunity for people that don't follow the trend to become outliers and then find themselves a very sought after product if they haven't followed the genetic fashion. Yeah,
that's right. So are Argentina still doing any active imports of semen from Australia?
Yeah, we did a load a month ago. And embryos as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, very much so. The last few years have been a bit difficult, COVID, plus more so their economy. Them to just get imports approved and foreign currency out of the country was a nightmare. Still much easier in neighboring countries like Paraguay, Uruguay, Brazil. We've done Mexico as well. About to do the US. So it's always it's different. We've got an export strategy that's totally different for every country, every region.
And interestingly, every country, I guess, ebbs and flows. Every country is at a different point in their production cycle, but also in their evolution of the industry. So many countries are still rising. We're finding Argentina's probably matured and plateaued. Brazil certainly in a rising phase, and there's countries that we haven't exported to that we're looking at that are right at the bottom. So there's a huge opportunity for Australian genetics to get on board and getting into those countries.
I think we were mentioning yesterday Brazil, which we're sort of very centrally focused on, having just been there. Their import protocols, not their registration protocols, but import protocols require certain baseline EVVs. So that's the only country that we're exporting to at the moment that requires that to get into the country.
Yeah. Wow.
Registration can be quite different. Argentina is very strict on that, by the way. You've got to have full mother and father verification. A donor for embryos has to have grandparent verification. So, you know, they're very, very tight.
Yeah. It's so interesting. So a date claimer for everyone, 2028, the Braford World Congress for in Argentina. Yeah.
Paraguay, actually.
Paraguay.
It'll be centered in Asuncion in Paraguay, and it's good. It's a nice compact country that the farm tours, which is typically the week before the Congress, will be nice and easy sort of to get around to. And, you know, they're really, we went there too on this trip, and they're great, very welcoming, very looking forward to doing it. They're not Argentina, so they'll do something a bit unique. But yeah, very much, welcoming people. It'll be great.
I'll be getting on that one. Any more comments from Alice or Marty and David on any of the topics? No. So
No more comments. Elsie.
it's just like I'm done. Lunchtime. Please feel free to take a photo of the contact details and get in touch with everyone. Yeah, more than happy to catch up. This webinar is recorded, so it will be uploaded to YouTube, and I'll send the link to you all later today. Thank you so much for your time today, Alice and Marty and David. We have so appreciated your insights. It's been fascinating. So thank you so much, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
Our pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Elsie. Thank you.